Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Rock and Wellness Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Joy Olson. I'm especially excited to share this episode with you. It's an interview I recorded a few years ago with Malcolm Saunders, the owner and creative visionary behind the Light Cellar in Calgary, Alberta. The Light Cellar is one of my favorite places for nutrient-rich superfoods, herbs, delicious sweet treats, and so much more. Malcolm's mission is to help people deeply connect to their food, and he brings over 25 years of experience in the world of nutrition and holistic living. He's also the author of Elixir Life, where modern nutrition meets ancient herbal wisdom. In this conversation, Malcolm shares his passion for the alchemy of superfoods and herbs and offers inspiring insights on how we can create and enjoy energizing, healing foods in our everyday lives. Although this conversation was done a few years ago, I know you will still love the wisdom and practical knowledge he brings to the conversation. So let's dive in. So welcome, Malcolm. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule, or I should say full schedule, to be here with me today and share your wisdom with the listeners.
Oh yeah, right on. Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. So, Malcolm, the topic of today's podcast episode is how to create a deeper connection to food. But before we get into some of those ways people can do this, and of course, the many positive benefits they will gain from this, I would love if you could share with the listeners your story of how the Light Cellar came to fruition. I love hearing your story, and I can't get enough of it, and I'm sure other people will love it too.
For sure. Yeah, right on. Well, it has been a journey. It's been a long one. Started when I was 16, and up until that point, food was whatever was quick, easy, and tasted good. I was born and raised by a mother who's Scottish, who, God bless her. I learned so much from her, but what I didn't learn from her was kind of how to feed myself and take care of myself in that way. That came via a 16-year-old, where it was Tuesday afternoon, unlike any other, and I had this big decision that I was gonna, had made. I was gonna tell mom, and so I'd come home after school, and I could, she was in the kitchen preparing supper, some sort of version of meat and potatoes. There was chocolate chip cookies cooling on the counter. And I says, "Mom, I'm gonna become a vegetarian. Still gonna eat that supper, aren't you?" And it was, she was very kind. It turned into a bit of coming of age speech. She was like, "Malcolm, I support you, but I can't help you." She was going through a divorce at the time, so kind of emotionally, she had a lot going on for herself. And, she didn't really know how in that sense, and nor did I. But I jumped in with 2 feet anyways, and it was born out of this kind of environmental aspiration. Had nothing to do with nutrition at all. That came later, and that came as a result within the first 2 weeks of going from meat, potatoes, and junk food to just potatoes and junk food. It didn't go so well. I literally had blood sugar issues, like fainting spells, but what it did is it actually woke me up to the reality that there was something to what I was eating, to food, beyond, again, what was just quick, easy, and tasted good. So it kind of forced me down that path, because I was committed to the ideology of being a vegetarian and living that lifestyle. And now the health and nutrition piece had to come in. So I was forced to explore that for myself. And like many of us, when we start on this journey, you get into the path of whole foods, right? I heard that very early on. Okay, if you're going to eat in this way, if you want to be healthy, then you want to prepare things from scratch. So, again, that was another transition, like overnight. I was like, okay, I'm done with the packaged foods, and started to try and make everything for myself from scratch. And there were a lot of failed experiments back then. Still to this day, if I make something, my family's like, "Ooh, Malcolm made it." They're not sure. They're not sure. It's like, come on, how many decades has it been? I've gotten pretty good at this over the years, but that's it. It's been self-taught. I've had some formal study with food, with nutrition. Worked kind of professionally as a chef, a few different places, but by and large, it's just been my own journey to try and figure out how to feed myself in kind of the ideological way that I wanted to show up in the world. I feel like we vote with our dollar, and no more important than our food dollar. And I felt one of the ways that I could have an impact on the world was was how I ate and the food that I bought and the food that I made. And so glad I took that path. It's been a long, long, long journey. I've been down every different rabbit hole, and I'm come out the end. I have no label. I'm not a vegetarian. I'm omnivore in that sense, and probably the only label, my friend R.J.O describes it as a flexitarian. So that's opportunivore. That's kind of what I subscribe to, following my gut more than nutrition trends. And initially, in that learning process, following different diets was a good way to learn, to kind of try things on, to experiment, see what worked for me, what didn't. But ultimately, it's about a relationship with our body and with food, and it's ever evolving and unfolding. And what I eat today might not be what I eat tomorrow or next week or next, month, season, year, different stages of life. Our bodies are always changing, and it's this kind of dynamic relationship that we need to tune into. We are intuitive, and our intuition is a way that we can navigate the realm of food and nutrition.
And we are our own best experiment, aren't we?
For sure. Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. A lot of people say, well, how did you come up with working, what does well for you? I said, honestly, it was trial and error.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah. So I've actually got a little tool I can help folks, if you ever feel confused about, what to eat, because, we're inundated, right, with different ideas, different theories. Everyone's got their own kind of angle. And if you kind of follow this tool, I guarantee you'll never be confused about food and nutrition again. And so it's an acronym. I call it a food scope. And the SCOPNE is a scope. It's a tool. I describe these as lenses. So you can look at any food, any diet, and know if it's right for you. It's kind of that next level. There's intuitive eating, but this is like intelligent eating, which incorporates, your rational mind, getting into the science, but it is also founded in that intuitive space. So, the first one, S, is science, right? And science is wonderful, right? We know that it can help us discern, what's in a food, right? What nutrients, what, compounds, and then what effect that has on the body. And nutrition science is wonderful. And for each of these lenses, we need to understand that they each have their own limitations. As great and wonderful as they are, we can't eat just by looking at it through one lens. And I know in our culture, our society, we kind of praise science because it's so wonderful. It's allowed so many advances within our civilization, but it does have its limitations, especially when it comes to food. I mean, food science, it's still actually very young, very new in that regard, and there's still so much to be explored. So let's kind of put it in its place and acknowledge it for what it can provide, but also know its limitations. Next one would be culture. So that's the C in scope. And culture is very powerful because it has that history, that longevity, where this is, information that's been coded throughout time that people have discovered through trial and error, through, experience, what kept them well, what kept them healthy, over generation after generation after generation. And I remember there was a stage in my journey where I'd come back. I'd been traveling in India, and I wasn't feeling very well. I'm sure I was dealing with parasites and needed to go on a cleanse. And I was like, what am I doing with my diet and my life? And I went to like a student clinic at Wild Rose, and it was Dr. Terry Willard there, and he had some students, and he said, if you ever get confused about what to eat, just go back to what your ancestors ate. And I think there's a lot of kind of wisdom in that, just to kind of help reset, recalibrate. And so, took that advice on, and, but I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute, the Scottish? You think I should eat like the Scottish? But which have a notoriously bad modern diet. That's the thing. But if we can go back to what that traditional diet was, there's actually a lot of deep wisdom there, and it can really kind of help bring us back on course. But of course, just like science, culture also has its limitations. It has biases. It's been limited by, time and place. And we live in a different time and place. That being said, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I believe, it offers us the most, even more than science, even more than the other ones I'm going to suggest, as kind of getting our bearings. So again, just one lens in this series to help us navigate the world of food nutrition. So science, culture. Next one is opinions. And I know opinions can sound pretty flippant, but we are social beings. We learn from each other. And I've had some of my best breakthroughs, most amazing breakthroughs, from, people that I look up to, admire, going like, hey, you should try this. And it's like, okay, cool. Let me try that out, right? We can fast track our learning based upon others' experiments, right? Like, what are you doing, Rachel? Like, you're looking amazing. Like, what's your secret? I want to know. Victoria Butenko, she started, her family was the kind of the green smoothie revolution, a number of years ago. I got super into that. And she told her story, how they had come from, the Soviet Union, back at that time. And, a time where there was a lot of austerity, very limited selection of food. They moved to the United States and they got like, here's the Holy Land of all the abundance. They can go into the grocery store, 24/7, 365. There's all this abundance, and it's so scientific. You look on the back of the box, and it tells you all the vitamins and minerals in there. And they just went to town, and they ate all the kind of the American, diet, the sad diet, the packaged food. And within a few years, each one of them had faced, a kind of a diagnosis from the doctor. Okay, you've got heart disease, you're obese, you've got diabetes, and here's your medication, and away you go. And she didn't accept that. She's like, what? We should be healthy. We're all young. I don't accept this. And so she took it upon herself to figure out, how to feed her family. And so literally, she said she'd be in the lineup in a bank. Right? She'd see someone that had that glow, like looked really good, really healthy. She'd go up to them and say, excuse me, what are you doing? You look really healthy. I want to know, what's your secret? And she kind of pieced it together for herself, by talking to people. So again, opinions can be really helpful, and again, has its limitations. We also need to recognize that, what might work for me as, kind of a male and in kind of midlife and a certain stage in my life is going to be very different than, a mother that's, nursing, for instance. And, I learned that the hard way because, through my journey of food and nutrition, I was, again, into vegetarian, I was vegan, I was raw vegan, and I dragged my family along with me, right? This is the way, we got to eat this way. And it provided a lot of benefits, mostly for me, to be honest. But for my wife who had just given birth and who was nursing, it wasn't the most ideal diet. So again, we came back to culture and we thought, okay, how have cultures around the world fed and nourished mothers and children? And it turns out every culture has a specific diet, has specific foods and recommendations for that stage of life. So when we're looking at others and we're getting inspiration, of course, obviously, we just got to put it in context of, okay, how might that apply to me? So that's opinions. And then ultimately, the last one, the P, the E is personal experience, right? So, science, culture, opinions of others, how does that all land for you? Spirulina, right? It's like science says, it's got over 65 different vitamins and minerals. It's full of chlorophyll. It's got phycocyan, which is anti-inflammatory. Here's all the benefits. Culture, wow, like it actually does have a long history of use. People are raving about it, but every time I eat it, it's like, it just doesn't sit well, or whatever the experience is. Like that kind of trumps them all. So, using all those lenses to kind of intelligently, decide what foods, like you say, experimenting through that is really key. So that's kind of the food scope acronym. We might come back to that in the rest of our conversation here. But you'd asked about Light Cellar and my journey. That's some of the learnings that I've come out of, many decades of exploring different diets and nutrition. And Light Cellar it's been born on my journey, and it's been kind of an offering to help others on this path to fast track our success. Like, we've really complicated the world of food and nutrition, and it shouldn't be. There's so many of us that have been lost or are still lost, that don't have the best relationship with food. And now that I've finally arrived there, it feels so good, and I wanted to share that back. So, kind of the mission, the motto of Light Cellar is to help people find and learn how to craft their own food and medicine. right? Maybe you've had a similar journey that I have, being raised kind of, just eating standard American diet, not thinking about food, not thinking about nutrition. And as you begin on this path, it can feel overwhelming, can feel daunting, but it shouldn't. We shouldn't need a degree. Even though, I've studied nutrition formally, I actually don't call myself a nutritionist because I don't want to set myself up on a pedestal to say that, well, I know and you don't. It's like we all have that within our fingertips. Absolutely. We need guides. So there's a time and a place for seeing a nutritionist. There's a time and a place for seeing a naturopath that can help us navigate that world. But ultimately, it all comes back to us to figure out what's going to work and to develop those skills. We're going to talk about deepening our relationship to food. We need to develop those skills to work with our food and know how to prepare amazing food. And it's such a joy, right? To feed ourselves and eat delicious food and feel really good about it.
It really is. I love that you said that, a person doesn't need a degree to know about nutrition. And that's so true. I mean, I know so many people in my own personal life, my mother being one of them, and who she's got a ton of knowledge about food, and she's always looking and, finding that next answer and, trying to get back to the nature of food because that's where she was brought up from, and I think it's so cool because she can probably out talk, maybe not the scientific, the real down into the nitty gritty science with a nutritionist, but man, I'll tell you, she's got some good advice. And, even though I do have formal education in the realm of nutrition and health, of course, I learn a ton, right? And I learn a ton from so many people. I love your acronym of SCOPE, and I think it all completely makes sense. We have to put each one of those aspects into perspective because one is not more important than the other. They really, like health, we have to have that holistic overview. One is not going to get us there.
Yeah.
Right.
So in a lot of us that maybe, studied nutrition formally, it becomes too heady of an exercise, right? We start like, oh, I got to get my antioxidants in for the day. Well, what are those? How do you relate to that? Right. First and foremost, we got to relate to our food, coming from that gut sense, that feeling, that instinct. And that's the natural way we approach food, right? Just in casual conversation, you might say, oh, what do you feel like eating? And then the head gets involved. Well, I think I should eat, It's like, no, I feel like having a salad. I feel like a juice. I feel like this. I feel like that. Let that be the inspiration. And of course, my caveat there to get to that intuitive space of eating, we can't do that on a junk food diet, right? It tricks the brain, it tricks the body. There's a lot of chemicals. There's unnatural proportions of certain things. Maybe it's fat or salt or sugar that kind of plays with our biology, where we might be, craving that, or it upsets our chemistry in our brain, where you might, again, crave that. Or if we have an imbalance in our microbiome, right, the probiotics versus maybe the candida or parasites that might influence our decisions. So it is a bit of a journey to get there, to do some cleansing, to come back to natural foods, to then, live a more natural life, eat a more natural diet, where we can, from that intuitive space, eat freely.
Yeah, and I find even from my experience with myself or my clients, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, it's almost helping people deprogram what they've been taught, right? Because I've got so many clients say, well, I have to count calories and I have to eat this much food and I have to do this. And I go, are you willing to turn that thought process around and think of food differently? And when they do, they feel like shackles have almost come off, right? They don't feel that there's so much pressure around nutrition anymore. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, I actually enjoy making choices for my food. And then intuitively, like you said, they start making better choices, right? When that pressure is a bit off. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the kind of the 80-20 principle. Like I don't need to battle myself in terms of like, I'm craving this, but I shouldn't eat it. I just allow myself, that freedom, and I don't necessarily have to kind of, like, oh, you shouldn't eat that. That's a bad food. It's like, no, like, and when you really embody what you're eating, really connect with it, then you can feel, right? You can make that judgment of, okay, how does this actually feel versus the conclusion I've made about this food, that it's good or it's bad. Like, feel into it.
Yeah, I had a nutrition teacher once in university said you should never look at food like good or bad. Food is
Right.
food, and then just look at, what's the best choice for my goal, right? That sort of thing. But I'll tell you, so many people say, how can you eat so much chocolate? I realize how much chocolate I eat. They said, well, when you learn where the Light Cellar is and you can go get the best chocolate ever, then you can eat as much chocolate as you want, basically, right? Because you are making that maybe a high level choice. And we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, in a bit, on how we could use food as our medicine. Right?
Yeah,
I know that
totally.
my personal journey to, better health, developing that connection with food. Actually, I had a coach once who said, you need to develop a better relationship with your food because of some of the eating disorder issues and things that I'd had in my past. She just said, start playing with food, start developing, start learning about food. And that took my, education really and my research to the next level. But I was so blown away at how powerful that was to my healing process. And, I'm so blessed to actually have gone through that experience because now I can help so many others, just like you've been able to help with your experience. So let me ask you, Malcolm, what does it mean then for you when you're talking to people about, what does that mean, developing a deeper connection to food? And what's the best way to develop this relationship for people who might not even know what that means?
Yeah, no, for sure. Awesome. Yeah, I think we've painted a good little picture so far, and to take that further, one of the best kind of strategies that I've come across, and it's different for everyone, but I think works 8, 9 times out of 10 versus what I did. Initially what I did, flip my life upside down. It's okay. I used to eat this way, but now I'm going to eat this way. And, the idea of like a diet, right? It's something that we go on and then off again. And it's like on and off. And again, there can be a time and a place. Maybe it's a cleanse. Maybe it's just a way to learn. Maybe it's just a way to kind of, take on and embody like, okay, how does a raw vegan diet feel? How does a paleo diet feel? What is ketogenic like? But ultimately, if we can get to a space again of that intuitive eating, and someone that you and I both know, I love his approach. This is David Wolf. He calls the ADD diet, the adding it in. So, start adding in the good stuff as well as upgrading. So don't necessarily like change what you're eating, but upgrade what you're eating, right? So if you eat conventional foods like, apples and chicken and butter and this and that, shift towards, the organic versions of those, the locally sourced, the grass-fed beef or the grass-fed butter, upgrading the quality and then beginning to add in, different new and unique foods, ferments. Oh, I'm going to add in medicinal mushrooms, those types of things. And, a little bit more getting into, deepening that relationship to food. Again, from where I started, it was, mostly eating out of a box, eating out of a package. Mom did prepare food from scratch as well. So I'm grateful for all those meals that she did prepare. But, we heavily relied on, and especially me as a kid, like I loved, like junk food, packaged food. My favorite meals of the day were breakfast cereals. I could eat those, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Didn't have to be in the morning, eat, Frosted Flakes. That would be my afternoon snack kind of thing coming home from school. But as I shifted into whole foods, and began to learn how to prepare things myself. And, I don't think the goal should be that you prepare 100% everything yourself from scratch, although I did that for years. But, majority of what I do consume is prepared from scratch. And I feel that the more that we can have a hand and a deeper connection to our food, the healthier we will be, whether that's in the growing, right? So I like to dabble in gardening. My thumbs aren't that green. I love plants, but I'm not a proficient gardener. I do a little bit. I can do potatoes. I can do garlic. I can do a couple things like that. But there's no way that I could ever rely on or produce my own food. But that's not the point. The point is that I do a little bit. Even if you live in a condo downtown, even if you just have a little herb garden. right? Just a one little tray. Like there's something incredibly amazing and impactful about that, to have that fresh basil, to feel it, smell it, taste it, to know that you grew it. And then also to preparing food, right? So to learn how to prepare any number of things, whatever catches your fancy, to kind of keep moving down that line of bringing food more closer to you. I had an example of a client. He came, him and his wife had been, customers for years, and they had two boys, and, they're older now, and they both left the home, and they had continued on this dynamic where she was the homemaker, very traditional, right? Like he worked long hours, provided for the family, so on and so forth. She took care of the home, prepared all the meals. So for him, he literally never, ever stepped foot in the kitchen because that's how their life functioned. It was all good. So finally, fermentation had come across his kind of awareness, and he's like, I might, I'm interested in that. So he came to a class, and his wife was like shocked, like, really? You're going to go learn to like prepare stuff? And so he came to a class, and 2 weeks into it, like after that, like she told me, she's like, Malcolm, like, I don't know what happened, but he is so into this. Like he's now fermenting everything. And that's all he does, is like, he found a passion, he found a hobby, and he started with sauerkraut, and then he got into pickles, and then he got into brewing his own mead, and it just became this passion. And that's all he does in the kitchen, but it's it brought so much to him, to his life, and his wife loves it as well, that he's there and he's contributing. And it's a craft, right? As humans, there's something very kind of deep and authentic to our experience as humans in growing, preparing food. And another thing that I'm really into is wildcrafting as well. So I'm more of a harvester than I am a gardener in that sense. And that's a whole other fun path, is figuring out what are the plants that are around us in our ecosystem that are absolutely in abundance, that could be used as food and as medicine.
I think people, once they've gone, I haven't gone to one of your foraging classes, but even just taking your ferments and learning that you can ferment spruce tips. Like I would have never thought that in a million years. And I just now, even when I'm walking, and I think it gives us, when we learn these things, gives us more an appreciation for not only our food, but for our environment. Like I look at the trees differently now, and I'm looking at the spruce tips going, man, I wonder if that's going to taste good in a ferment. You just start looking at, the pine pollen that's coming out, and you're like, wow, everywhere around us is nourishment, and it gives us that much more appreciation for nature, which I think is unfortunate right now, is I think there's too much living in a box, going to the grocery store, that there's no appreciation for even how that food got there.
Yeah, no, I hear that. Yeah. And, as a kind of a young environmentalist, this aspiration, we've got to save nature, right? It was admittedly coming from a space, though I felt very connected to it. That's where the passion comes from. Even now, there's a lot of people who kind of say, oh, we need, like, as if it's something separate from us, right? Because like, oh, it's the nature out there, the environment. It's like, no, like, we're absolutely intimately connected to it, and that's when people will value it. Like you say, when you recognize and you realize how interconnected we are to all the plants all around us, when you've got that favorite patch that you go pick berries from, when you go connect with the spruce trees and are picking the tips, like it has much a deeper connection versus something kind of abstract. Oh, we should save the environment. It's like, no.
That's right. You can save the environment. You can contribute to that in your backyard and what you choose to eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Oh, I think it's fascinating when you start looking at things, like from learning that I look at a birch tree different because I know what can grow on it. I look at, even just things that are coming out of the ground going, I wonder if that's edible. What can we do with that? How could I turn that into a salad? Right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. So it's really cool. Now, of course, these are things that take time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It
like
is
you said, there's a lot of people that will look at kind of when I talk about groceries, and they're like, how do you spend so much on food? And I said, well, first of all, it's important to me, right? We spend money on what's important to us.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything of spending money on, like you said, the spirulinas or things. I personally do well with spirulina. I know that some people don't, but it's okay to invest in yourself once you understand what it's doing and the importance of it. Right? Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I like to say I'm not into cheap food, in that sense. Like cheap food comes with consequences,
Yes.
Environmentally, socially, politically, and then most importantly, personally, to your own health. And I think we've gotten used to that idea, that kind of this entitlement, this privilege of like, wow, food shouldn't cost that much. Most of the world, in fact, I would say more than 80% of the world spends the majority of their income on food.
Yeah.
And we are blessed. We live in a very abundant civilization and society, where we're almost the flip. Like most of us spend very little on food, and we kind of think that's the way it should be. But there are absolute, drastic consequences to cheap food. So I think it's kind of shifting, perspectives and priorities. And once you get into really good food, like it's good, it's amazing, like it tastes better, right? I always like to give that example, which everybody knows, things like tomatoes, things like strawberries, right? Nothing beats that experience of tomato off the plant, strawberry, right? Carrot out of the ground, the flavor, the aroma, there's something real, something tangible there versus, middle of January, supermarket, hydroponically grown. It's like, looks like a tomato, doesn't quite taste like one, or that strawberry that's like giant. I mean, it's empty. It's empty calories. And in our society, we have too many calories with too few nutrients. So we got to flip that around. We got to increase the nutrient density, lower the calories. When we do that, that's where the flavor's at. That's where health is at. And just our overall experience of life just increases from there.
Yeah, I think those of us who have had the opportunity to, let's say I grew up on a farm, my mother always had a garden. We would pull the carrots out of the ground, push the dirt off and munch away. It might be a bit gritty, but there's nothing like fresh peas or fresh carrots. And I'm often saddened when I hear people say, well, I don't like this particular food, let's say. And I said, okay, and I've had the opportunity, I used to do cooking classes, and then all of a sudden I would make these foods and people would be like, I had no idea that even tasted like that, right? It's just a completely different experience when you're working with real food.
Yeah, totally. And so the other aspect of this is, when we talk about, our community, our city, our society, there's been this kind of increase in the impersonal, the industrialized, the big box, right? A lot of people complain about Walmart. It's like, well, but if people stopped shopping there, it wouldn't exist. And I'm really grateful to see that there is that shift. A friend of mine, he calls it, from Wall Street to Main Street. There's this shift back to relocalization, and it's definitely happening, within the realm of food. This idea of the artisan, the craft. It's amazing. I personally, I think it makes our communities and life much better when we support those kinds of things. Again, not only does it taste better, not only is it nourishing us more, but kind of on a social level, we're empowering entrepreneurs, individuals who are living their path, their passion to be a craftsman, to be an artisan, like that local baker, versus buying from some multinational, and some person ends up just being a cog in that industrial machine versus living from their heart. That's the other transformation that's possible when we connect to food on that level.
Absolutely. And just a whole energy around it, right? Just when somebody, a small food, let's say you mentioned a baker. I mean, they're putting so much love and energy into their craft and what they're doing, and you can really feel and taste the difference.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's a completely different experience. So let me ask you this, Malcolm. So let's say we've got a listener that's saying, okay, this is kind of making sense to me. I would like to have better health. Maybe I want to prevent or manage a chronic disease, or just take things to the next level. So let me ask you, what would you recommend to be some of your top foods, maybe superfoods, super herbs, whatever you think might be a great first place for people to start. Let's say they walk into the Light Cellar, which I've taken so many friends before, and they go, whoa, what is this place? Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, go there, go here. So if somebody walks in and says, help,
All right, for
where do
sure.
I start?
Well, it is so individual. However, if I have to pick one thing, I would say ferments is actually a very, 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 very powerful way to start. So fermented foods, and fortunately, there's such a huge diversity. So, some people love sauerkraut. Other people, can't stand it. So, no problem. Choose something else. But when we bring in live cultured, raw fermented foods, they have such a power. Like, do nothing else, right? Like, just keep eating what you're eating. Honestly, even if you're eating McDonald's, well, hopefully we'll move beyond that. But like, literally, whatever you're eating now, just by adding in live cultured fermented foods, your health will improve. They're going to help with digestion. They're going to help with your whole digestive system, increasing your probiotic count, your whole microbiome. Which is then going to increase, your mood, nutrient assimilation, everything across the board. Ferments are a great place to start, and have been a big hole for a lot of us in this kind of, standard American westernized, industrialized diet. We kind of missed the boat. Every culture around the world consumes fermented foods, except our modern industrialized societies.
Well, I think that's why there's so much talk around the disruption of the microbiome, right? The healthy bacteria in the gut, as you've mentioned already. And what I think some of the research has found, and in my experience, as soon as that starts to heal, like you'd said, well, we got it, even if you eat McDonald's, but in saying that, if you start adding fermented foods to that diet, pretty soon the person's not going to crave McDonald's anymore.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's huge. So that would be my kind of number one suggestion. Any kind of ferment, doesn't matter what it is, bringing that in, because you're going to get enzymes, you're going to get probiotics, you're going to increase and improve your microbial and microbiome health. And then that, it's digestion, it's immunity, it's mood. There's so much that is literally the foundation of our health. So start there. And then start to look at, anytime you're in the grocery store, look for that local, look for that wild, look for that organic, biodynamic, whatever it is, and just start to make more and more of those choices. And then it comes down to, as well, like adding in things. So, adding in ferments. Another area I think is really powerful, really key, is mushrooms, and in particular the medicinal mushrooms. And so, how I kind of have navigated the world of food and nutrition, how I share it now, is I bring people back to the 4 food groups. Now, not the ones you learned in school, not the Canada Food Guide, because that was not helpful. But it turns out that humans, throughout time, throughout all cultures, throughout the world, actually do consume foods from 4 different food groups. And those are plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi. Plants, animals, pretty obvious what those are, although, there's a lot of depth there, and that's kind of what I would encourage is, again, go for the highest quality, keep upgrading what you're consuming from those food groups, but also really expand that diversity. The plant kingdom is massive, and that's one of the biggest benefits I got from the time that I was vegetarian, was I really expanded. To say I was a vegetarian when I first started is a bit of a joke. I was more of a carbitarian, right? It was anything that was like, carbohydrate, sugar, bread, cookies, pasta, this kind of a thing. I barely ate vegetables, but slowly I began expanding my food repertoire to a huge diversity of different types of plant foods, like pollens, like flowers, like algae, like roots and barks, and you name it. We can just go on and on and on and on. One little quick key when you're exploring the plant kingdom is to think about eating the rainbow. Right? So colors are clues as to the nutrition. So we want to eat a full rainbow spectrum. And I'm not talking about red dye number 5. I'm talking about, natural colors that represent nutrients, right? We know that beta beta-carotenes are the oranges, the reds. We know that green is chlorophyll. Purple, these anthocyanins, right? These are these compounds that have a deep, profound physiological effect, that they're beyond the macronutrients like our proteins, carbs, fats, so on and so forth. These phytonutrients are very, very healing and very, very key. So if we eat a full spectrum from the rainbow, we're going to be getting that in. Just as a quick little aside, so I've mentioned, my background is heritage is from Scotland, England. Both my parents are from there. And in particular, the Scottish side of my family, we can joke about it. We're all very pale. We all burn very easily. And when I began shifting my diet, I had a greater resistance to being out in the sun versus just immediately burning. It's those pigments, those carotenoids, and other compounds, that gave me more color, that gave me more resistance to the sun, where I began to welcome the sun. I love the sun. I love being out in the sun versus kind of fearing it. And, when you're on kind of a white bread, white rice type of diet with no pigments in your food and eating it and putting chemicals on your body and all that type of stuff, then you are going to be more susceptible to the sun and the damage that it can incur. But natural foods allow for, more cellular repair and more of an intimate connection with the natural world versus, I got to stay away from it and hide from it. So get into the world of pigments and the nutrition there. And one other quick little insight for the kingdom of plants is think of the worlds of herbs, and by herbs I mean herbalism, as almost a sub-food group within that category. Now, it's not necessarily going to provide you vitamins, minerals, and calories. It plays a different role, a different purpose. And this is more the realm of, the phytomedicines, the plant medicines that we can utilize and bring into our life. Things like echinacea, things like licorice, that, going to work more on body and organ systems to help us function, and not as a replacement of modern medicine. No, if you're into that and that's part of your life, it's about bringing in, opening up alternatives, more kind of preventative and, kind of more tonic, tonifying effects for your body. And plant foods as well as the plant medicines are incredible.
Oh, for sure. So suggesting people start with ferments.
Yeah.
Eating the rainbow as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then with that, learning to take everything to the next level, right? So if you are going to eat plants, try to get them to be organic. If you are eating from the animal kingdom, try to support local and organic as much as possible. I completely agree with that as well. And then it was fungi and
bacteria. So bacteria, that is our fermented food.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's the fungi kingdom, which is kind of why I brought that in, right? And it just frames, if those are our 4 food groups, think about trying to consume foods from each of those kingdoms, and it just emphasizes, how important, especially the bacteria and the fungal kingdoms are, when maybe we might not necessarily think about that. So fermented foods have been a staple, a part of human diets, but so have fungi, right? Both as food and as medicine. For centuries. So, sure, it might include eating, button mushrooms and portobellos and this kinds of things, but it should also include, shiitakes and maitake and oyster and other culinary but medicinal mushrooms, and then things like reishi, things like chaga that have more of that medicinal aspect too.
So let's say somebody doesn't like the taste of mushrooms. How can they still get that nutrition?
Oh, yeah, good question. So when we talk about, something like reishi, got one right here, it doesn't actually taste, mushroomy in that kind of, typical sense that we think about. Something like chaga as well. They ended up tasting maybe a little bit more earthy, a little bit more bitter. And what we can do is we can prepare those into tea, or we can get extracts that it's already been prepared for us. And then we just easily slip that into, our morning coffee, our afternoon tea. We can drop it into our smoothies. And that brings us to kind of the topic, the idea of elixirs.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your book. So I have it right here, and I know you have it as well. But
Mhm.
Elixir Life, Modern Nutrition meets ancient herbal wisdom. I personally love the book, Malcolm. Um, I've been drinking your elixirs for a long time, and then this came out, and it was like, yay! But I still drink your elixirs because it's easier. But but what I learned was a ton of. Some of my favorites in here: the maca and matcha latte. Love them. Turmeric tuna, chaga chocolate milkshake. There's so much in here and all the information that you put in here. Can you share with us the story of why you decided to write the book and share these secret recipes with the public?
Yeah, totally. Well, it really ties into exactly what we're talking about in terms of, how do we bring in more, variety and nutrient density to the things that we already do, right? Like I mentioned, it's tough when you flip your life upside down and you go on a diet and you can't have this, you can have that. What I wanted to do was to kind of, again, upgrade, what we're already doing, make it easy. You don't have to develop a new habit or a pattern. Most of us, we have a smoothie, we might have a coffee, we might have a tea, some point in our day. It's the idea of upgrading that into what I call an elixir. So as the title of the book, you mentioned it there, it brings the best of modern nutrition with ancient herbal wisdom. I talked about trying to incorporate this realm of herbs, things like the medicinal mushrooms. Well, you can do that, in something like an elixir, which, quite simply is imagine if you took, superfood smoothies and bulletproof coffee, combine those together. That's sort of in the realm of what an elixir is, not literally, because that would be horrible, but, but functionally, right? For years, being in nutrition, I was into smoothies, right? It was that kind of grab and go, pack in all the nutrients for the day. I got my berries, I got my protein, I got my probiotics, I got my greens, whatever it is. A lot of us will construct smoothies in that kind of a way strategically, as our grab and go nutrition for the day. And then that herbal element might be like a coffee, right? It is not providing nutrients, but it's providing a function. It's like, okay, I need energy, right? I need to get going, kick things up a gear. Or maybe it's like that sleepy time chamomile tea. It's like, it's been a long day. I just need to chill out. I just need to relax. And elixir allows you to bring both of those together into one cup. And it's really about, customizing it for yourself. Again, how we started off this conversation of intuitive eating, right? Like, what do I feel like? How do I need to support myself today? Is it to keep my blood sugar balanced? Is it to, give me my nutrients for the day? You can do that through an elixir. So you create the herbal tea as the base, and then it's adding in all those other food ingredients, like you build a smoothie, and blending that up. So we started doing that years ago at Light Cellar. We were probably the first, elixir bar within Canada for sure. And I'd been inspired by some places I'd seen and visited down in the States, and some friends that were into this concept. And so we brought that to Calgary, and just over the years, slowly, when we first started, it was like, we'd have like the drink of the day. Sometimes that same drink we'd offer, we'd keep going with that recipe for a week or 2 weeks, and then we'd switch it up. And at some point, we kind of formalized it. We created an elixir bar. We had a full menu. And after a number of years of people going like, wow, love the recipe, we put it all into the book. So there's 30 recipes here. They're hot, cold, sweet, savory. There's no one specific, definition of this has to be an elixir. And again, it's very broad, it's very intuitive. And the whole idea of the book was for people to be able to create those drinks exactly if they were inspired by what they tasted here. But more importantly, to get the idea, the concept, so that they could then do it at home, right? For anyone that makes smoothies, I'm going to guess they probably don't use a recipe anymore, right? It's like, again, it's that intuitive chefing. It's like, okay, I'm going to throw in this, I'm going to throw in that. You blend it up. When you get to understanding how to bring elixirs together, which I outline in the book, it does become that intuitive chefing, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great art form.
Right. And like basically from our whole talk here is developing that connection, right? And just going, okay, how am I feeling today? Okay, I know this and this and this is going to help with that. And you've crafted your own.
Yeah.
Right? Almost your own natural, hate to say the word medicine, but your natural, well, I guess that's why the word elixir is so great. right?
Yeah, and it really speaks to that. Let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food. I want to kind of reunite, like you say, like sometimes we think, oh, medicine, right? It's like that comes from someone in a lab coat. No, like we can. Our food is our medicine, right? And just kind of naturalizing that, and it's about prevention. It's about nourishing ourselves every single day.
Absolutely. So I know, Malcolm, you do many educational workshops and talks at the Cellar, which I absolutely personally love to attend.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, we do have a whole bunch online. So if you go to lightcellar.ca, look for online, well, basically classes, and then there's in-person and there's online. So both of those are available. The in-person classes we're doing right now are plant walks throughout the summer. So June, which we're already through that pretty much, but moving into July and August, there are a number of plant walks. If you're in the Calgary area, you can come join us. Get out into nature and really begin to explore what's in your backyard that can be used as both food and medicine. I think it'll really surprise you to come out, to learn, to taste, to experience, and know what's possible. So that's what we offer during the summer. And then in the fall, we hope to get back to our regular class calendar, so you can learn how to do fermentation. You can learn how to create healthy chocolate. You can learn how to create these elixirs. And we'd love for anyone to be able to join us there at that time. And like I said, if you're farther away or you're not able to make it in person, then we do have a bunch of online courses as well.
Wonderful. So that's lightcellar.ca. And we can find you on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Yeah, totally. At Light Cellar, and myself personally as well, at The Malcolmist.
Perfect. I will add all those links into the episode show notes on my website. So anybody who's interested in connecting with you, and of course, I'll put the address to the store and everything. So thank you again, Malcolm, for being with me here today. I won't keep you for too much longer, but do you have any last thoughts or words of wisdom for listeners to take with them today?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you had alluded to it. If someone's listening, maybe they're inspired. Last thing I want to do is overwhelm anyone. So just know that it is a path. It is a journey. Start with one thing at a time. Even if you come to the store, we actually actively discourage people from buying too much, especially if they're new, right? It's like, oh, I got to get everything. It's like, no, don't, please. Start with just one or two things. Really try it on. Get to know the benefits, right? Because if you throw 12 brand new things in a blender and you've never had them before, maybe 3 of those things are working and another 2 aren't. How do you know, right? So begin to develop that relationship, with a new fruit, with a new herb, kind of one or two things at a time, and then just build from there. Right? Don't overwhelm yourself. That will keep you on the long term for success. Know that it's a journey. And you're making it one step at a time. And myself and anyone here at Light Cellar would be happily to support you and guide you. We're here literally to help you find and learn how to craft your own food and medicine.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Malcolm. I appreciate everything you and your staff have done for the community. I'm so blessed to live in Calgary and have the opportunity to go visit the store. Probably one of the big reasons when we talk about moving away, I'm like, but then we won't have the Light Cellar so close. So thanks again, Malcolm. And thanks to you, my listeners and supporters, for tuning into this episode of the Rockin' Wellness Podcast. I hope you have received great value and, of course, wisdom that Malcolm has shared with us today. So for more information about Malcolm, the Light Cellar, and his book, The Elixir Life, please visit the show notes at www.rjowellness.com/podcast. Until next time, my friends, keep rocking your wellness.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Rockin' Wellness Podcast. Make sure to visit my website at www.rjowellness.com, where you can subscribe to the show and check out all the show notes. While you're at it, if you found value in this podcast, if you'd simply tell a friend about it, that would help out too. You may choose to join the R.J.O Wellness community to take advantage of the freebies, courses, and coaching that will take your voyage to the next level, or support this podcast with your monthly membership. Until next time, my friends, keep rocking your wellness.